Hey everyone, welcome back to the Logan Cabinet Shop. I'm Bob Rosieski. Thanks for joining me for part 2 of the sharpening series. In the last episode, I covered sharpening straight edge tools. Today we're going to be looking at edge tools with not so straight edges. So if you haven't already done so, you may want to go back and check out the first sharpening episode before watching today's podcast, because I'm going to be building on the things that I talked about in the first episode in today's show. So let's talk about the edges real quick on the flat tools. Just like a flat, straight-edged iron, whether it be a chisel or a plane iron, these tools need to have a bevel ground on them. So I do them the same way. The only difference is when I'm using the grinder, I'm going to sweep the tool. So instead of just moving it along the tool rest straight back and forth, I'm actually sweeping it along a sort of a radius. So it looks something like this. And what I'm doing is just very same thing that I did when I was doing the straight edge tools. I'm watching the grinder marks and I'm watching how they creep up on this edge. And as I begin to get closer and closer to that edge, I'm going to adjust where I'm grinding, where I'm removing material, and let the tool tell me where it needs more material ground. And similarly, I'm feeling for that burr. Okay, I stop grinding once I feel a burr. Now, gouges are a little bit different. Some people like a hollow grind on a gouge, some people don't. I'm sort of indifferent. I really don't feel that I have enough carving experience to notice the difference at this point. I have ground it both ways. I think grinding a gouge to me is actually just as easy to grind a flat bevel as it is to grind a hollow bevel. And my carving tools right now have flat bevels on them. And how I do this is to actually use the side of the stone. So I will place the tool on the rest, and what I can do is I can watch the bevel angle and how it lines up with the side of the stone. Once I have the bevel angle set, all I need to do is keep my eye over the top to maintain that and roll the tool. So as I grind, I'm rolling, and I'm not actually going to grind this because it's actually sharpened. I don't need to grind it right now, but what I'm doing is I'm rolling the tool, maintaining that bevel angle. I'm using the top of the tool rest to help me stabilize the tool, and I'm just using my wrist to roll and keep the bevel on the side of that stone, and that gives me the flat grind that I want on a carving chisel for an out camel gouge. So let's move over to the other end of the bench, because with this grinder I can't handle concave irons or in camel gouges. So we're going to do a little something different over on the other end of the bench. Okay, so when I need to establish a new bevel or reshape the edge of a concave tool like this in camel gouge or a hollow molding plane iron, or a complex molding plane iron with a concave edge to it, I just like to use a chainsaw file. I think it works quick enough, but also works slowly enough that I have control and I don't damage the edge. A Dremel tool with the little grinding stones is definitely another possibility. I think those little stones that come with the Dremel tend to glaze fairly quickly, especially with tool steel. And a glazed stone heats up very quickly. So it's real easy to burn and overheat the steel with a Dremel. So I don't particularly like them, but again, your mileage may vary. I just like, again, a simple chainsaw file. I think this is like a little $6 file from the hardware store. When it wears out, you toss it or use the steel to make some other type of tool and get yourself a new one. But so what I do is I just clamp the tool to the bench using a hand screw or regular bar clamp. And you can set your angle. If you have a protractor and you want to set your bevel angle, you can do that. I pretty much usually eye it up because with these concave tools, I usually establish a pretty low primary bevel. This one is probably, I don't know, 20 degrees. It's very low. And there's a reason for that. It makes it easier for me later on when I need to hone that edge, because honing a concave edge is a little bit trickier than honing a flat edge or a convex edge. So when it comes to these concave curved tools, my primary bevels are typically pretty low. And I'll just take the file and I'll file that bevel. And with a tool like this, you want to follow the curve and file towards the center of the circle that this would create. So you don't want to file this straight the whole way. You want to sort of follow the curve this way, and then as you come to the center, you file straight on. Now this clamp's going to get in the way here, but again, filing towards the center of the circle that the curve would make, and that's how I'm establishing my primary bevel. And it takes a little bit of time. It's not something that's going to happen in 2 minutes, especially if you've got to really take away a lot of material. But that's why I make this primary bevel fairly low, so I don't have to do this very often. Molding plane irons don't typically get the heavy use that a bench plane would, so they don't need to see as frequent sharpening. So I don't find I have to file them all that often once they're done. The gouge I do the same way, and I'm not going to clamp it down, but this one, because it's concave in this direction, you would file straight through, but you need to again establish that bevel. So here, I'm filing to establish the primary bevel, and I can sort of roll the tool to keep the orientation. And I just take my time, file it away. Again, as I said, the in-kennel gouge is probably the trickiest of all of them to sharpen. So just take your time, go slow. The file removes material relatively slow, so it allows you to maintain control. Check frequently to see, look at your edge to see where you need more material removed. Now I can see here that I'm pretty thin on this side. I need to focus more here and in the center. So that's what I'll do. Once we have the primary bevels established, either with the grinder or with the file, then we can move on to honing those bevels. Okay, now similar to what we did with the straight edge tools, when it comes time to hone curved edge tools, we've got a couple choices. When it comes to the convex edge tools, I like to just use my bench stones. It's most comfortable for me. I typically have them hollow ground, whether it be a 4-plane or a molding plane iron. The only time I will not do a convex edge on a bench stone is if I'm talking about a complex molding plane iron where I've got a combination of convex and concave curves in the same iron. Then I'll use my slipstones to do all the honing. So, what are the tricks to getting a curved iron like this honed up? There are gadgets out there. You can buy specially shaped rollers for your honing guides. Again, I just do this freehand, similar to the straight edge tools. And how it differs for me is just where I'm putting the pressure on this iron. So when we talked about the straight edge tools and we were talking about the chisel, I was pretty much centering my pressure on the iron. And if I needed to correct it, then I would move the pressure a little bit. Here, I'm more concerned with maintaining this curve, and what I want to do is I want to watch where the iron itself is honed, and I want to try and keep the honed edge the same thickness from corner to corner. So in this particular case, now I'm seeing I've got a little bit less of a honed edge on these corners. I want to work on those corners more. So that's where I'm going to start, by putting my pressure on the corner of this iron, and I'm going to hone the corners. And I've heard it said before, especially when it comes to things like gouges and molding planes and things like that, to work on the outside edges, and the middle will take care of itself. And generally that's true. We tend to favor the center of the curve, and what usually ends up happening is the center gets overworked and honed too much and the sides not enough. So if you're going to make any type of additional too much honing, err on the side of doing too much on the outside edges, because most likely you're not going to do too much on the outside edges. You're going to see that the center ends up taking care of itself. So now I'm moving to the other corner, and I want to again establish the burr here. Now I didn't need to grind a burr into this one because the hollow grind was still left from the last grinding. So what I'm doing now is just really rehoning. So as I said before, I'm starting on the corners, starting on those outside edges, putting pressure on the outside for 6 strokes or so, 6 or half dozen to a dozen strokes. Move to the other corner. You'll feel the blade rock because it's not a straight edge, so you'll feel it rock along the edge. And with water stone or an oil stone, you can actually watch the oil kind of squish out where you have more pressure. So I'm going to put more pressure on this corner, and that's where I'm going to focus. Okay, now I've got a nice burr there, I've got a nice burr on this side. Now I'm going to work the center just a little bit, and actually what I'm doing is I'm putting my pressure just left of center in this case, not perfectly on the middle of the blade. I'll do that last. Now I'm going to go just to the right of center, sort of halfway between the corner and the center, where your pressure was the first time. Okay, that looks good, and then I'll finish up with a few passes on the center. And I've got a nice burr there, all the way across. So now I can take this iron and I can move up to my finishing stone, and I'm going to do the same thing. Start with pressure on the outside corners, and this time I'm going to be watching for the scratch pattern from this stone to be replaced with the scratch pattern from this stone. And you go through the same steps that we went through with the straight edge tools, the only difference being that you're moving the pressure to different points along this curve as you hone. And whether we're talking about a 4-plane iron like this, or a small molding plane iron like this, it's the same type of deal. You're focusing the pressure around this curve. So start on this outside edge. Then move your pressure over and do this edge. Move back to here and focus your pressure. And again, like I said before, focus on the outside edges and the center will pretty much take care of itself. Alright, so how do we take care of a concave edge now? Well, this is where our slipstones come in. Now obviously, there's no way that I can hone this bevel on a flat stone. All I'm going to end up doing is honing the corners. So we use a slipstone. This stone is curved, and I have a soft Arkansas and a hard Arkansas. I start with the soft Arkansas stone. It's a coarser stone. And how I do this is I sort of take this stone and I place it flat to that bevel that I established with the file. I lock my arms to my sides so that I'm not getting a lot of changing in bevel angle. I want to try and keep the stone itself vertical because I can easily see this straight line. So I'm going to marry the bevel to the vertical edge of the stone. Then I'm going to, again, lock my arms, and I'm going to raise this, my wrist that's holding the iron, I'm going to raise it ever so slightly, maybe, 5 degrees or so. I probably have about a 20-degree primary bevel on here. So I'm going to raise this up about 5 degrees. Now, I can lock my arms in here, the angles on my wrists. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the stone and I'm just going to move it straight up and down. The benefit of doing this is I can watch to make sure that I'm not changing that angle that I'm holding the iron at. So I'm maintaining the angle with the iron and I'm moving the stone straight up and down. And as I mentioned before, what I'm trying to do is focus my efforts on the outsides. The center will pretty much take care of itself. And I'm doing the same thing. I'm feeling for that burr, and once I find that burr, once I have a burr all the way across, then I can switch stones and move to my hard Arkansas and finish this up. And then I will, similarly to the straight edges, I will chase that burr using the flat edge of the slipstone and the curved edge of the slipstone alternately. So I'll keep doing that until I can feel the burr all the way across, and I'm not quite there yet, but I can see where it's coming up. And I can see the bevel, and I can see when the very edge touches the stone, because again you'll see a tiny little squish of oil. So I know I have that angle set right where it was before, and I can just focus on moving the curved portion of that slipstone in this concave edge, and I'm going to work those sides until I have a burr. Then again, I can chase the burr on this side of the hard Arkansas, stone in the middle, chase the burr, and finish up with the strop. And with, again, as I was mentioning before, the beauty of not having the strop glued to anything is for a wide iron like this, I can put a bend in this, and I can easily just pull that iron along there, polish up that bevel, and finish up sharpening on the strop. Now, if we move to something like a gouge, this can be done in a couple of ways. You can definitely do this on your bench stone, the primary bevel. If you decide to do that, the way that I learned how to do it is to, again, similar to a straight edge tool, get your bevel ground, and this is where a hollow grind helps if you're going to do it on a bench stone. Lift until you feel that tool lock in, and then you're going to push, and as you push, you're going to roll that tool along the stone, and just roll it, and that's how you're establishing your hone. Now, because I can't feel this very well, because it's a curved edge, there's not a lot of registration on a flat stone. So unlike a plain iron or a chisel, it's a little bit more difficult to feel it register. So again, I turn to my slipstones. And what I will do, I'm just going to use the hard stone on this one, because this one doesn't need to be sharpened up all that much. It's a similar process to what I just showed you with the molding plane iron. I'm going to watch this bevel, because I can keep that bevel straight and I can keep this stone straight, and I can move this way until I can see the bevel is flat against the stone. And then I'm just going to move the stone up and down, and I'm going to roll the gouge as I move the stone up and down. This allows me to watch the bevel to ensure that that bevel stays flat on the stone, since it's a little more difficult to feel it. and I can just slowly roll the gouge as I hone that bevel on the flat of the stone. And when it comes time to chase the burr, on a carving tool, I actually like a small secondary bevel. A lot of carvers will recommend that you put a small secondary bevel. So similarly, and this one's not going to fit in here, so I would have to flip to this side of the stone. Similarly to doing the primary bevel, I'm going to start by holding the stone vertical, and I'm placing it inside of the curvature of the gouge. And because I'm putting a secondary bevel on this, on the other side, and it's a very, and I mean maybe a 5-degree bevel, it's a very low bevel angle. Because I'm not trying to, increase the strength of this edge really. I'm just giving myself more control with that second bevel when I'm carving. So I'm just going to put a very slight bevel, and then again, just a couple of degrees, and I'm going to again sort of turn the stone, keeping it vertical, and just establish or hone or touch up that secondary bevel on the inside of the gouge. And my left arm, the one that's holding the gouge, my wrist is locked at the angle, and my arm is locked against my body. My right arm, I'm pretty much moving, sort of moving from my elbow. My shoulder is pretty locked. And once I have the inside done, then again, I can go to the strop. Now in this case, I'm going to use the side of the strop because this is a smaller gouge. So I'll just use the corner of this strop, and I'll pull the tool, and as I pull it, I'll turn it through in both directions and strop that edge. So I'll turn it, turn it, turn it, and I'm turning the gouge, rolling the gouge to strop that edge. On here, it's a similar process. As I pull the gouge, I'm turning it. I'll move the stones out of the way, I'll move this back, maybe make it easier to see. So I pull the gouge towards me and roll it as I strop, so that I'm polishing, stropping, and polishing the entire bevel. Again, focus your efforts on the outsides, and the center will take care of itself. You can test your gouge the same way as you would test a chisel, just by using a piece of pine. The last gouge that I want to talk about is the in-canal gouge, and I did mention, this is a little bit trickier than the out-canal gouge. But really, sharpening this isn't a whole lot different than sharpening a molding plane iron, because you need to use the stone on the bevel of the tool. So again, similar to the molding plane iron and the out-canal gouge, you can lock your angle in place, lock the tool in at the right angle, keep your arm and your wrist locked, and move the stone along that bevel. And it's not an extremely quick process, but these aren't tools that you're going to sharpen all the time either. They're not heavy use tools like a plane iron or a chisel would be. So you're not using these nearly as frequently, so you're not going to be sharpening them as often. So take your time. Remember to lock in this arm that's holding the tool at the proper angle. Get your bevel until you feel it flat. Once you feel that bevel flat on the stone, then you can just move the stone vertical and get that edge nice and sharp. Okay, so the last thing I want to do again today is to just demonstrate testing these tools once you have them sharpened. And I did get a great suggestion after the last video, since I only used the sharp tool to show what the pine cut would look like, to maybe use one that's not so sharp to contrast the two cuts. So I thought I would do that today. I have this chisel that isn't so sharp, and you can see, I have to push it so hard that it's actually moving my my test block here. I'm on the bench. So this chisel is definitely not very sharp. And what you'll see when you don't have such a sharp tool, in the pine end grain test, because it's such a soft wood, you have a lot of scratching. See that slip? That's a dangerous tool. So you'll see there's a lot of scratching, and you'll see this crushing and tearing of fibers here. And that's what you get when your tools aren't so sharp, compared to a nice new sharp gouge, which will push through the pine like butter and just shaves it right away and leaves an almost polished surface behind. And just cut super smooth. And there's your difference between a not so sharp tool and a sharp tool. Alright everyone, so that's about it for the curved edge tools. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot me an email at logancabinetshop@verizon.net. Use the contact form on the website, or drop a comment on the blog post for this episode. And I'll try and answer your questions as best I can. I know with these tools, with the curved edges, there's really a lot to cover. They seem a lot more complex than they really are. I think everything makes a lot more sense and really is a lot easier once you pick up a couple of gouges or molding planes, or try and sharpen something with a not so straight edge. It becomes a little bit more evident, and it becomes a little bit more understandable when you have the tool in front of you. But definitely, if I didn't explain something well enough, shoot me an email, drop a comment on the blog, and let me know. And I'll see if I can answer your question. If not, there's probably someone else out there who reads the blog or watches the podcast who can. So keep the comments and the emails coming. Next time, we're going to get into sharpening some saws. So for those of you who've got hand saws in your shop that need some work, next time is going to be the sharpening episode for you in part 3 of the sharpening series. So hopefully you'll come back and join me again. We'll see you.
Thanks for watching.